Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be talking about who I think should be cast on a season of Survivor Blood vs. Water 3. Now obviously with Blood vs. Water 3 here, I am intending on this being a half returnee, half newbie season, as I feel like that's the way it worked the best back in the first Blood vs. Water. And also that's the easiest way for me to do this video. And I will fully admit, this was pretty tough to put together. When coming out with this cast, there were just a lot of things I hadn't really previously thought about with Blood vs. Water seasons that makes this just such a difficult group to put together. And it kind of makes you realize why the Blood vs. Water 1 group was so random. Because with Blood vs. Water here, you have to think about, one, you want enough male-male, female-female, and male-female teams. You want all like different types of groups. You don't want all the duos to be like brother and sister or whatever. Just weird things like that you gotta think about. Then also you have to keep people that have played together previously separated. You can't have more than like 2 or 3 returning players on the same tribe, as again, all the returning players will end up being on the same tribe here. So that's another dynamic I had to think about. Also had to think about challenge strength, the challenge strength between the returning player tribe and also the newbie player tribe. Had to think about archetypes between these tribes. There's just so much stuff that goes into Blood vs. Water that really becomes kind of a pain to cast. To be honest, I can understand why they haven't done a Blood vs. Water since then, as again, it's a lot of stuff to juggle around. Yeah, another thing is also you have to make sure that the returning player in these dynamics makes the gender dynamics on each of the tribes correct. Like, it's such an interesting casting process and such a pain. It really is. Another aspect that I'm very limited by is the fact that I'm not casting. I'm not able to know every single family member that each of these returning players would have. So the only information that I'm able to get is through stuff that's like really apparent through their social media or through, obviously, family visits. So that's how I got a lot of the information for the people that did end up making this cast. While obviously, if this was a true Blood vs. Water season cast by Survivor Production, they would have more free reign to cast whoever they really wanted because they would know more about these players and their families. But for me, I'm going off of a very limited base of information. But with that out of the way, we're going to start this off based on the order of the returning players' original seasons. Let's start off with Survivor Borneo. So I considered Jenna Lewis and her brother Jai from the family visit and All Stars, which had a really funny moment there. I just didn't think they really made the cut. And the same thing with Greg and Julie from that first season. I just don't think Greg wants to play again. He's also been he was actually asked back for the original Blood vs. Water to play with Julie and turned it down, so I don't think it's super likely. Now from the Australian Outback, we have Jerry Manthe and her sister Jennifer, her loved one from Heroes vs. Villains. I considered them and did not put them on, as I think there's already too many sister groups. I felt like there were other dynamics that were more interesting than theirs. Then I also had Colby with his brother Reed, which would have been really funny. I really wanted them to make the cast. I just felt like with the male-male groups, there were 3 locked teams for me. And because there were 3 already locked teams for me, I just felt like Colby and Reed could not make the cut, but it would have been really, really funny to see them on a cast. Now for Survivor Africa, where the only one I really considered was Big Tom and his son Bucky Bow. Again, that would have been really funny, but male-male groups, as I said, there were 3 locks, didn't really consider anyone else. I didn't really consider anyone from Survivor Marquesas or from Thailand. I mean, I guess Kathy and her son Patrick would have been funny, but again, really, that wasn't really that much of a consideration. Now from Survivor to Amazon, there were a couple people I considered. I considered Heidi and her husband Cole Hamels, but I think there's a couple problems. One, I don't see Heidi wanting to play again. She didn't even want to come back for All Stars. And then Cole Hamels, what I understand, is kind of preoccupied with other stuff, so I don't really see them coming for a season of Survivor. But probably the one that's more notable, and one that I thought would have been a lock on the cast when I was putting this together, was Rob Cesternino and Nicole Cesternino. I really thought they were going to make the cut. And to be honest, I thought they were locks. I thought they were absolute locks when making this cast. But they just got cut. The male-female groups were just really, really competitive. And considering the fact that Rob, again, he keeps on flipping on whether or not he's willing to come back or not. Well, I think it'll be really interesting to see him and Nicole on a Blood vs. Water season. His hesitancy to come back was kind of a deal breaker for me in terms of putting on this cast, as I just felt like there were people that were more guaranteed to say yes. So I did not end up considering anyone from Survivor Pearl Islands, as I think the big one there in Rupert and Laura have already come back. But from Survivor Vanuatu, I did consider a couple people. I considered Twyla and her son James. Didn't really make the cut. And I did actually really consider Eliza and her mom Susan. And again, the female groups were really tough. They were originally on the cast, and there is no mom-daughter group on this cast, so they were definitely a consideration, but I did end up cutting them as I felt like there were just too many people in like Susan's sort of archetype. But I ended up cutting them as I just felt like I was trying to keep the tribes even, and it was kind of tough to keep them even with Eliza and Susan on there. And also considering that there's already someone in Susan's sort of archetype on the cast already, so I had to cut them. Now from Palau, and the only one from Palau that I even considered is actually the one that made it onto the cast, the first person on the cast here, and that is Stephanie LaGrossa and her husband, Kyle Kendrick. And the reason I put him on the cast, one, Stephanie LaGrossa has talked recently about wanting to play again. Also, I did some research on Kyle Kendrick, and he's not really doing anything too intensive right now, nothing to the point where he can't play Survivor. Then also, I know production's going to want to have a athlete on this season. They really love that aspect of having Brad Culpepper on Blood vs. Water 1. They liked having John Rocker on Blood vs. Water 2. I think they would want some sort of sports player on this season as well. And we'll talk about one that should have been an obvious one later on, but they didn't make the cut. So I decided to put Kyle Kendrick and Stephanie LaGrossa on this cast, as I felt like they fit that sort of mold. Now from Guatemala, there were a lot of considerations from Guatemala. I just don't think they're super likely at this point. I considered Judd and his wife, Kristen. I love Judd, but I don't think production loves Judd. So I think at this point his time's kind of passed. I considered Jamie and Raimi because they were considered for the first Blood vs. Water. Again, I think their time's kind of passed. The one that I think is the bigger consideration here, though, is Cindy Hall and Mindy Hall, who were also, again, in consideration for First Blood vs. Water. Cindy was kind of an okay character, but Mindy Hall is someone that was on Rock of Love. She's a big character herself. I think it would have been interesting to see them on the cast. They were actually originally on the cast at one point. However, I decided to take them off, and the main reason for that is I do think seeing a Cindy return at this point is just going to be really weird. I don't think it's something that's super likely. Though I do think if it is ever going to happen, it'll probably be for a season like this. But I just felt like there were more likely returnees than Cindy, so I decided to cut them. But if there was a real Blood vs. Water 3 and Cindy and Mindy were on there, I would be super excited for that. Now moving on to Survivor Panama, and there were a lot of considerations here. So I did consider Shane Powers in Boston. The problem is Shane Powers himself, I mean, I think one, he's ruined his relationship with production, but also he's very clearly talked about how he doesn't want to play on a Blood vs. Water season, so more than likely that's never happening. But I did put two teams actually from Panama onto the season here. Both the returning players here had multiple people that they could have came back with. So first one here is Terry Dietz. And Terry Dietz, it came down to who he was going to play with, whether it be his wife, be his daughter, his son. I went with his son, Danny, and I don't know if his son, Danny, can play Survivor due to health reasons, but I think if he can, I think they're the perfect fit for a Blood vs. Water season. Again, they have a storyline, such a perfect storyline of last time Terry Dietz played, he had to drop out due to his son getting sick, and for them to come back for a Blood vs. Water season would be such a great story arc. So for me, having them on the cast was kind of a no-brainer. Next one is Suri. Now, who do you put Suri on the cast with? Do you put her with HB, her husband, or do you put her with Jared, her son? I put her with Jared, and the main reason for that is because Jared was supposed to be on David vs. Goliath. Supposedly had to drop out at the last second due to something we don't know yet, and I think that was the main thing of hesitancy there, of like, why did he have to drop out? Obviously, he does get replaced by Davey, which, to be honest, probably was for the better. But, I mean, he is someone that made it onto a cast of Survivor, so I'm pretty sure that unless there was some, like, reason that makes it so he can't ever play again, that was the reason why he got kicked off the cast to begin with, I do think a duo of Suri and Jared would be a lock for a Blood vs. Water season like this. They made my cast as well. Now we're just going to run through some seasons here. I didn't put anyone else on the cast until Survivor Philippines, so let's just run through some people. From Cook Islands, I considered Penner. I just don't think Penner's really at a good time to be leaving home, so I don't think he's going to want to play Blood vs. Water. I considered Earl from Fiji. I think him and his wife would be great. Obviously, they just had a kid, though. That's kind of probably stopping them. So I didn't put them on. Didn't consider anyone from China, Micronesia, or Gabon. But from Tocantins, obviously I considered Taj and Eddie George, which I think is one of the bigger locks on a season like this if they want to come back. I think the problem is that I have no reason to think that they want to come back. They did get asked for the first one. They turned it down. Taj has always said that she never wanted to play again. I just don't think it's going to happen, but if they were willing to play again, I think they easily replace Stephanie or Kyle or even Suri and Jared. From Samoa, again, really nobody. I did consider Russell Hantz coming back with like someone like Sean, which would be pretty interesting. But again, they don't want Russell Hantz again. From Nicaragua, I considered Marty, but like I don't know who he'd come back with, so there's really no one there. I considered Holly with her daughter Alex. That was someone that actually made it decently far into consideration, but didn't end up putting them on. From Redemption Island, I did consider Ashley Underwood and her husband Chris. Both of them are athletes, that's why they were both pretty deep into consideration, but obviously I picked Stephanie LaGrossa over her. From South Pacific, considered Edna and considered Jim. Just didn't really make the cut. From One World, I did consider Chelsea, as she was in consideration for the first season. Again, just didn't make the cut. And now for Philippines. As I said, this is where the next person that made the cast comes from. I did consider RC and her father, Craig. Obviously, they were supposed to be on the first Blood vs. Water, had to drop out at the last second due to Craig's medical stuff, but that's exactly why they didn't make the cut. And also, I considered Lisa Welchel and her brother Justice, just because that was such a weird relationship. It's just so weird. But I don't think Lisa wants to play again, so that's why I cut them as well. But one of the bigger locks on the board for me, again, I think they had to be on here. A male-male team here. We got Malcolm and we got his brother Miles. I think this would be great. I think Miles is a pretty fun character during that family visit. Malcolm's obviously someone that I would love to see play again. I think he obviously had that run in Game Changers that did not go his way, but I think seeing him for a fourth time is in the cards, so I think this is a perfect spot to bring him back. Now, I didn't really even consider anyone for next few seasons either. Now, 26, Reynolds, I would love to see him back. I mean, he could go with his wife or something, but again, I just felt like there were bigger locks than him, so I didn't put him on. Obviously, Blood vs. Water is Blood vs. Water. And then Cagayan, there weren't many family visits there, so there's not really anyone to really consider there. Obviously, 29 was Blood vs. Water 2, so again, not much to consider there. And now we jump into Survivor 30, Worlds Apart. I did consider So Kim, So along with Do, or Do? I don't know. Either way, didn't put him on. Again, this is another situation where they were supposed to be on 29, but then Do had some sort, or Do, whatever, had some sort of medical emergency and they couldn't go on the cast. I think because that, probably another reason why they wouldn't be on this cast. Now we move on to Survivor 32. The only one I really considered here is the one that made the cast, and that is Tai Trang and his husband or partner. I don't remember if they were married. Either way, Mark. So Mark the Human. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a lock. I think it'll be great. I think Tai Trang is someone I would love to see play Survivor again. I think his dynamic with Mark seemed to be pretty interesting based on the family visit and Game Changers, so why not put them on the cast? Now moving on to Millennials vs. Gen X, where I did consider Adam and his brother Evan. But again, I think the male teams, I think they were pretty much already selected right from the beginning of the video, so didn't really even consider them that much. And I did consider Jay Starrett and his sister Melanie. This one I did actually really consider because, to be honest, there's not that many younger women on this cast, and that would definitely fulfill that archetype. And to be honest, I think you can replace the next group that I'm actually going to be talking about that did make the cast. I think you can replace them with Jay and Melanie. But for me, there's a specific reason why I put the other team on instead of Jay and Melanie, though I think Jay and Melanie would actually make probably more sense on this cast and actually fulfill more archetypes than the next team, but oh well. But now moving on to Survivor Heroes vs. Hustlers, I considered Chrissy and her husband Keith. Again, just didn't make the cut. Same thing with Mike and his wife Barry, but the ones that didn't make the cut, the one that I was talking about that could be replaced by Jay and Melanie is Devin and his mother Sonia. And this is the only reason they're on this cast, mind you, is because Devin has said he would not return for any season outside of Blood vs. Water 3 with his mom Sonia. That's the only reason they're on this cast. I would like to see Devin play again. I think Devin played one of the most underrated games in the history of Survivor, but he doesn't want to play again unless it's with his mom. So screw it. Ruining this entire cast just to put Devin and Sonia on this cast. And also that was another reason why I also cut Eliza and Susan, because yeah, I feel like Susan and Sonia kind of similar-ish archetype. And no offense to them, but probably weaker in challenges, so didn't want to put both of them on the same tribe. But the other team that I put on from Survivor, HHH, and this was a tough one because, again, I think archetype-wise, they're so similar to another team that I'll be talking about later, but I just decided screw it because I wanted both of them on. And here from HHH, I put Lauren Rimmer and her sister Sunny. Lauren Rimmer was someone that was really fun on HHH. I think she's someone that was a fun character and also showed herself to be a decent player. And I think her dynamic with Sunny was really fun during that family visit. So I think they're a pretty easy team to bring back here. I think their biggest troubles with actually returning at some point is probably just archetype reasons. Now from Ghost Island, the only one I really considered here was Dominic and his wife Kristen. And again, they probably could make the cut. I mean, I think really there is a group from season 38 that we'll talk about that did make the cut that I think you could switch them out with Dominic and Kristen. But, I mean, the sense that I get from Kristen is that I don't feel like she would want to play Survivor. That's not the sense that I get. So I didn't put them on. But, again, they could be on the cast, and I'll be fine with that. From David vs. Goliath, I considered Angelina and her husband, Austin. Again, I think they would be great on a Blood vs. Water season. I think a problem with that is obviously they just had a kid, so they didn't make the cut. I considered Christian and his girlfriend, Emily. Again, just didn't make the cut. And I also considered John Hennigan and his wife, but again, he's kind of too busy right now, right? So, didn't make the cut. Now moving on to Edge of Extinction, where there were a couple teams I really considered. I considered Victoria and her dad, didn't make the cut. Considered Gavin and his wife, Carly. I just don't feel like production's too incentivized to bring back Gavin. I really considered Ron and Lloyd. I really wanted them to make the cut. To be honest, I mean, obviously it's between them and Ty and Mark. Obviously very similar archetype there. And I could see you switching them out. I mean, I would like to see Ron Clark come back. I just don't feel like he's as likely of a returnee as Ty, and that's why I went with Ty and Mark. But overall, I mean, you can have Ron and Lloyd on this cast. I'll be really happy with that. But the team that I did put on from this season on the cast, I think you got to have Rick Devens, right? I think Rick Devens, again, one of the biggest locks for a returning season. So to have him back on Blood vs. Water 3, I think is a no-brainer. And have him with his wife, Becca, why not? Again, they took up a husband and wife slot here. That could have gone, again, to Dominic, could have gone to Rob Cisternino, but I felt like Rick Devens was a more likely lock for a returnee here, so I decided to put him on the cast over them. Now we're finally down to Island of the Idols. I did consider Lauren Beck and her husband, Matt. Again, just archetype-wise, and really just gender-wise, it did not fit. There just wasn't enough room for another female-male group on the cast. But there are two female-female groups that made it onto the cast from season 39, and the first one is one that I did feel weird about, because again, I already said, I have Lauren and Sunny on the cast. I feel like these two were very similar archetype, though with obviously a very different type of relationship, and that is Elaine and Tanya, obviously in a romantic relationship, obviously very different from a sister relationship, but I felt like character-wise, I felt like Elaine and Lauren are fighting for the same casting spot. I felt like that was the tough thing there, and especially considering they're both going to be on the same tribe, I felt like it was tough. I decided to let it go. Again, if we look at the original Blood vs. Water, we have Tina and Lauren Moret and Monica Culpepper all on the same tribe. Again, three people, all of a similar archetype there. So I decided, screw it. Why not? Whatever. Put Elaine on the cast. She's one of the bigger locks to return anyway. And also her, obviously, the relationship here between Elaine and Tanya, different from Lauren and Sunny. I thought it was enough to put them on the cast. And the last slot went to the I thought had to be on the cast. I think this would be a lot of fun. I put Nora and her sister Lana. I just think it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, Nora is one of the best characters in a while in Survivor, especially like when you're thinking of like people that are solely characters and not also players. I think Nora is, again, such a fantastic character, and I think her sister seemed like a fun character as well. I do think there's probably the issue of, I think she had a problem with her eyesight, right? But outside of that, they're both obviously very strong physical women. Definitely help out their tribes and challenges. I think they were pretty perfect fits for this cast. There we go. That is my cast for Survivor Blood vs. Water 3. Which, again, was a pain to put together. But I actually would love to see a Blood vs. Water 3. I'm actually surprised it's taken this long. I'm surprised that it's been, over 10 seasons since the last Blood vs. Water. Because I think it's such a unique idea and one that would be really fun to see again, especially with returning players. But let's go through my cast. So, the male groups I have Terry Dietz and his son Danny, I have Malcolm Freeberg and his brother Miles, and I have Ty Trang and his partner Mark. Out of the male-female teams, I have Stephanie LaGrossa and her husband Kyle Kendrick, I have Siri Fields and her son Jared, I have Devin Pinto and his mom Sonia, and I have Rick Devens and his wife Becca. Out of the female teams, I have Lauren Rimmer and her sister Sunny, I have Elaine Stott and her, I guess, fiance now, right? Tanya. And we have Nora Salmon and her sister Lana. So that's my cast for Survivor Blood vs. Water 3. Yeah, I think this is a fun cast. I think there's a lot of people you could also just replace them with. I mean, like, if you put on people like Ron and Lloyd, I wouldn't be that upset. If you put Colby and Reed, I wouldn't be that upset. Again, Jay and Melanie, I wouldn't be upset. Rob and Nicole, Dominic and Kirsten. I think there's other teams to put them with. I think this is a feasible season for production to do again. I just don't know how incentivized they are to do it, but I would really enjoy it if they did. So that's my cast for Survivor Blood vs. Water 3. Thank you for watching.